Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Well, sitting beside me is my 1997 Toyota Land Cruiser Colorado VX, which I bought about 18 months ago from a YouTube viewer down in London. I got an email out of the blue from Harry asking if I wanted to buy his Land Cruiser. Now, Harry bought this from Toyota Park Lane in 1997, and he'd kept it all the way through. He was only selling it because of ULEZ rules, the ultra low emission zone, so this would have now cost him £12.50 a day just to drive it to the supermarket. And of course that isn't really financially viable, so he emailed me to see if I wanted to buy it. Now we agreed a deal of £3,000, which I was quite happy with. I mean, bear in mind, how many other one-owner Land Cruisers are there out there? Very few, I would have thought. What appealed most about this one, in addition to the low ownership, was the fact this is petrol, which is quite rare. It uses a 3.4 litre petrol engine, most were diesel. I'm a big fan of 90s boxy 4x4, so I just had to have it. Since then, you'll have probably seen this in the background of many other videos, because for about a year it just sat in my mechanic's yard waiting to get worked on. Happily though, yesterday it was finally fixed. It's now got 12 months MOT with not a single advisory item. Every single job has been done. So I thought today I'd give you a quick tour of it and tell you exactly what I've had done. I'm really pleased with it. I think it looks $1 million really, which is good really because it owes me about that. I have massively overspent on this thing. I just thought it deserved it. When me and my colleagues picked this up, I personally drove this from London all the way back up to Manchester, and it wasn't the greatest experience. There was a problem with the prop shaft, so every time you went over like 45 miles an hour, it was just shaking all over the place. On top of that, the tyres were very old, and it did concern me a bit driving all that way. Anyway, we made it back in one piece, but I knew I had a lot of work to do. Well, we might as well start off at the business end, hadn't we? Let me show you what work we've had done. Now, although this has only had one owner from new, where's my bonnet stay? You can tell I'm not mechanically minded, can't you really? Because this had only had one owner from new, there were loads of receipts so I could see exactly what had been done, and more importantly, what it needed. In its 28 years on the road, this had had several cam belt changes, but it was overdue one. So I've had a new cam belt done, new water pump, and it's had a full engine service. So new spark plugs, new fluid, new filters, the whole lot. It now runs beautifully. In fact, it runs like a Swiss watch. Although not my Swiss watch, because I refuse to pay the £500 servicing charge. But anyway, like someone's Swiss watch. Listen to this purr. You ready? Sounds alright, doesn't it? In addition to all this work, it had a new battery as well, because the old one had seen better days. The next thing I did was replace all 4 tyres, and I had the wheels refurbished. Now, as always, I use Prestige wheels over in Bredbury, so they stripped the old wheels because they were a right mess, and then they've powder coated them and they look as good as new. Then I've had 4 brand new Continental tyres fitted. They're nice and chunky actually. That cost me about £1,000, by the way. I think the wheel refurbs were about £320, £330, and 4 brand new Continental Cross contacts were about £850, so it was quite an expensive job. But I think, well, I couldn't really cut corners on the tyres. It's no surprise really because this is an old 90s 4-wheel drive, but it wanders all over the road. Not in a bad way, it's just how they are. I suppose you've got such chunky tyres with massive sidewalls, it's never going to handle like a Porsche Cayenne or a BMW X5. I've had the prop refurbished. We found a company that did that, so now that's sorted. So now thankfully when you go above 45 miles an hour, there are no wobbles or shakes. It's perfect. It needed some other bits and pieces doing as well, so it needed a little bit of welding. There was an exhaust bracket that was broken or snapped or something, so that's been done. I'm sure there are probably some other things that I'm missing actually, but I haven't paid my bill yet. Friday's the day I go and pay my mechanic, and I'm dreading that, to be honest. I think it's had new brake pads and stuff as well. I think they've been replaced. Moving to the back, I got rid of the old spare wheel cover. It was all ripped and worn, so I just got rid of that. Now we've got the nice original tyre on show. Before any of you think I'm cutting corners and I've lost the plot, I have ordered new reg plates for it. Now, I used a company called Retro Plates who are on Instagram. Nick, who runs the company, is really knowledgeable, so he's got me original Park Lane Toyota plates. They're on the way. They should be here tomorrow, actually. That'll be the final piece of the jigsaw. Of course, the biggest improvement with this car, though, is the appearance. After it had all its mechanical bits done, I took it down to Jimmy, my painter, Jimmy the Magician, and he's worked his magic, really. He's painted all the silver bits, basically the lower half of the car. This is two-tone, obviously, and it couldn't be matched, so he's just painted the whole lot. If you remember, there was a big dent here. So he's managed to work wonders, really, and pull that dent out and then repair it. And you'd never know. Honestly, I'm so impressed with the paintwork on this. It looks as good as new. I actually don't think any of this purpley blue colour is new paint. I think all it's had is a proper detail and buff. And now when you run your hand over it, it's like glass. I'm really impressed. My bill there with Jimmy was about 1,200 quid, but it was £1,200 well spent. I'm just trying to tot up my costs in my head. So I paid £3,000 for the car, £1,000 or so on wheels and tyres, £1,000 or so on paint, and another £1,000 or so on cam belt service and some welding. So it owes me an awful lot of money, this. I think realistically, one in this condition is probably worth £7,500, maybe £8,000. So that's what I'm going to market it for. It's very rare to find a one-owner car like this in such condition. If I had the space, I'd just keep it because it is quite charming. And like I say, I like 90s boxy four-wheel drives. But I haven't really got the space and I'll never use it. So I think on this occasion I'll be sensible and try and rehome it. I've ordered a new headlamp as well because this one's got a crack in it. I got that off eBay. That's not a problem. I don't want to miss anyone out here, so the last job it had was a proper detailed valet. So I went over to the lads at Tameside Detailing, who again have worked the magic. The carpets and seatbelts have come up looking like new. Bear in mind this car sat around for about a year. You'd never know. It's completely immaculate. Right, anyway, enough talking. Let's get out on the road and see how it drives. In fact, before we do, I just want to say a big thank you to today's video sponsor, Car Vertical. Now, before you hand over any cash for a used car or motorbike, it's really important that you do a thorough vehicle history check. You just don't know what you're buying otherwise. There are so many dodgy cars out there with a hidden past, I'd hate for you to end up buying one. So it's really important that you're doing these checks. And it's really easy to use as well. All you need to do is go to carvertical.com and type in the reg or the VIN. And by the way, this isn't just a UK thing, it works in over 35 different countries. So if you're in the market for an old Land Cruiser or any 90s boxy SUV for that matter, then check out Car Vertical. This will tell you if it's ever been stolen, written off, had a mileage rollback, or has a son in finance on it. In addition to that, it shows you the ownership, the reg plate changes, the MOT history, the spec, the average market value, all that sort of stuff. It doesn't take long and it isn't expensive either, and it's cheaper still with my promo code HIGHPEAK. That's HIGHPEAK all one word, HIGHPEAK, and you'll save yourself 20% off each and every check that you do. So thanks Car Vertical for sponsoring today's video and helping bail me out of the red on this project. Right, let's hit the road. And we're away. There's just something about old 90s and early 2000s cars. I've said this before and I'll say it again, but it's my favourite era. I think that's just because they're quite simple and honest compared to modern cars. There's no silly complexity. They came with all the luxury you'd ever need, like for example this one's got air conditioning, heated seats, electric windows, but none of the silly complexities that plague modern cars. I think this is why I like them so much. Driving this is quite nostalgic for me. These are the kinds of cars that I grew up with. A couple of my mates at primary school, their parents had Land Cruisers of this era, so it brings back many memories for me. I can remember being stuck in the very back on a hot day. The only bit of ventilation you got was that little bit out the rear windows. You sort of popped them open like a caravan, that was it. You know what's impressive about this car though? Everything still works. It's just really straightforward. I did about 250 miles recently in my old Nissan NX, and that's exactly the same. I know it's not the quickest or the most comfortable, but I just didn't care. And this Land Cruiser is exactly the same. And I also think, without getting on my soapbox, keeping something like this on the road, unlike the old NX, is just far better for the environment than scrapping them and buying a brand new car. It just is. Can you imagine if we had the same mentality with houses? You know, something like that old farmhouse there. I'll tell you what, let's knock it down and build some sort of eco-friendly eco-box. It just strikes me as being very wasteful. Surely it's better to keep the cars we've got, try and keep them in tip-top condition, and get as many years as possible out of them. I had this same argument, when I say argument, I mean with myself in my own head, but I had this same argument with that 300,000 mile Volvo XC70 that I took to the top of the Alps. I took that car all the way to Davos just to prove a point, that it's far better to keep a car on the road like that and do 300,000 miles in it than scrap it and buy some new EV. When you look at the bigger picture, that's far better for the environment than buying a brand new hybrid or EV. It just is. Anyway, enough ranting about that. Going back to the Land Cruiser, I'm really impressed with this. I'm glad I saved it. I think at £3,000 it could have just fallen into the hands of somebody who didn't really care about it. They'd have just ran it completely into the ground. So I'm quite glad to have played a part in this car's life and prolonged it, giving it some TLC that it desperately needed. I have toyed with the idea of doing a road trip with this. Maybe to North Africa or something, I don't know. It's certainly capable of getting me there in one piece. So I'd watch this space, it might happen, I'm not sure. It just comes down to time really. But it would certainly be a really good road trip car. It's got everything you need. Plenty of space, four-wheel drive, reliability. It's quite comfortable, sitting on these leather seats. And there's a ridiculous amount of storage as well. You've got loads of cup holders, loads of storage compartments. Just a really good utilitarian truck. The ride's a bit crashy, as you can probably tell. But then it's going to be. It's an old school body on frame truck with an old ladder chassis. So you do feel all the bumps, but I couldn't care less really. Another thing I've had done to this is rust protection. So while it was up on the ramp, it's been thoroughly schultzed. It's like a type of wax oil really, just to stop the rust getting any worse. And that's the trick really to keeping an old 90s car on the road, because they do famously rot. But if you can do that every couple of years, it'll just keep the rot at bay. If I could sell this car to somebody who cared for it as much as I do, then it would no doubt last for another couple of decades. It'd be quite a cool thing to drive around in, wouldn't it? You know, whenever I've been to California, you see loads of old 80s Land Cruisers still on the road. Of course, they don't have the same sort of climate we do here in the UK, so they don't rust as much, but it's just quite a cool car to use as your daily run around. And this, in this condition, I'd be quite proud to pull up anywhere in it. I think it's quite cool. It's definitely got a certain charm anyway. Now it's had all this money thrown at it, I've got all the confidence to go anywhere in it, really. In terms of handling characteristics, then it's exactly what you'd expect, really. There's an awful lot of body roll. It wanders around the road, really. I mean, the steering's quite vague. Bear in mind, we're still going in a straight line. Look at this. There's a little bit of play. I think that's thanks to the chunky tyres, to be honest. I mean, it stops and goes. It isn't the quickest. This 3.4 litre petrol, you'd expect to be quite punchy, but I mean, it does feel quite nippy. It's just you're not exactly pinned into your seat. But still, I'd much rather it than the diesel. In terms of fuel economy, I imagine when the conditions are just right, if you go in steady with it, it'll do maybe 20 miles per gallon. It won't be very frugal, but then it doesn't really matter again, does it? I would argue it's still better for the environment to keep something like this on the road, even if it's only doing 20 mpg, than buy a brand new EV. So, ladies and gents, I think that's about it. But let me know below in the comments if you'd have saved this old Land Cruiser as well, or if you think I should go on a road trip with it. Let me know possible destinations. So yeah, thank you once again for watching. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and TikTok. Got a proper 90s sound to that indicator, hasn't it? Yeah, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and TikTok. I'll leave the links below. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Cheers guys. Adios.